from Commonwealth Corp. All right, I'm going to start again. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Karen Chack from Commonwealth Corporation, and I'm here with Tommy Heverin, who's running the technology right now. And so today we're going to be reviewing the recently released RFP for behavioral health partnership expansion grants. And as you just heard, we are recording this session. So we will have a recording available for you to re-listen to or share with your coworkers. After this session, we will also have a set of regular PowerPoint slides if anybody wants them after this session. And those, just request those. Just moving forward during the session, please use the chat to post written questions during the session. We will respond to questions as possible at the end of the session. If we don't have sufficient time or there's a question that we are not able to answer today, we will post all questions and answers on the Commonwealth Corporation website on a regular basis during the process, during the time when you're all putting together your applications. The question and answer document will be able to be found through the same link as the RFP on our website under the available funding tab. Okay, great. All right, let's go on to the next slide. So just as a brief intro, I think you skipped one slide. Yep. Okay. As a brief intro, the funding source for this Behavioral Health Partnership Expansion Grant Initiative is from the Mass Health Delivery System Reform Incentive Payment. That's DSRIP, statewide investment program with additional funds provided by RISE, Massachusetts. The Massachusetts Delivery System Reform Incentive Payment Program, some of you may be familiar with, it's a $1.8 billion 5-year investment program authorized through Mass Health's Federal 1115 Medicaid waiver. The DSRIP program funds 3 major initiatives which are central to transforming Mass Health. And one of those is investments in frontline and extended healthcare workforce development. So these dollars funding this expansion grant really come from the statewide investments portion of the DSRIP dollars through the Executive Office of Health and Human Services. Again, combined with a donation from RISE, Massachusetts. RISE is an independent nonprofit foundation committed to ending the opioid epidemic and reducing its horrible impact on people, families, and communities. So the funding that's contributed from RISE is actually going to be designated for projects seeking to address substance use disorder and opioid use disorder treatment and services. As you all know, behavioral health employers across the state are reporting and have been reporting persistent difficulty with hiring and retaining qualified staff. So the efforts to expand access to available behavioral health services are inhibited by challenges of recruitment and retention, similar to other parts of the healthcare industry. The Executive Office of Health and Human Services is very committed to targeting funding to help address these challenges, and therefore seeking to build on a healthcare initiative previously launched by Commonwealth Corporation, which is the Healthcare Hubs Project, and in partnership with the Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development, we were able to increase this new stream of money. So ComCorp has partnered with Mass Health and RISE to expand the reach of the Healthcare Hubs grants through this targeted emphasis on community-based mental health and substance use or opioid use disorder workforce. Go to the next slide. The funds from the DSRIP dollars that are targeted to this initiative are going to support behavioral health workforce development, particularly in areas that have not previously had funds addressed within the statewide investment portfolio. The focus of these dollars will include outreach and training capable of increasing the skills and increasing the number of individuals, particularly from underrepresented groups, into peer and entry to mid-level community-based mental health and SUD/OUD workforce positions. In addition, the resources are going to be allowed to be used to support clinical supervision time and mentorship strategies for both master's and bachelor's prepared clinicians in need of supervision hours as they work towards licensure. And we'll describe that in a little bit more detail later. ComCorp will fund proposals from the Mass Hire Workforce Investment Boards. Those are the eligible grantees. They are currently operating as healthcare hubs. The workforce boards, in partnership with community-based behavioral health employers, will be able to apply for these funds and through their application process, we expect them to propose to implement solutions that may result in additional training and placement or training and advancement program opportunities among the behavioral health employer subset. In addition, as I mentioned, the funds will be allowed to be used to support staff salary replacement for clinical supervision time, both for the supervisors and for the person who is being supervised, only for those hours where the clinical supervision is directly related to their licensure requirements. And the fourth piece is something that we always like to support, and that's regional workforce capacity building. So these are the four options which we've named, options A, B, C, and D, which will be described in a little bit more detail later, and obviously are described in great detail in the RFP. The training, let me just say one thing about the regional workforce capacity building. This is really proposing to use funds to support regional coordination that results in, for example, additional training program capacity in behavioral health occupations, strengthening of partnerships with workforce entities and education providers, community-based behavioral health employers. And there are other examples of appropriate funding activities for this option D listed out in the RFP. Okay, go on to the next slide. So the target population for these funds. Grant funds may be used to train people who are unemployed or underemployed, very similar to other ComCorp grants. Current employees at mass employers, or individuals who are otherwise seeking new employment. So very broad range of eligible potential participants for these funds, specifically within the community behavioral health realm. Additionally, staff who are working towards licensure and need to gain clinical supervision hours towards licensure will be able to get their supervision hours reimbursed. There is an overall priority with these dollars for funding to serve individuals from underrepresented groups among the behavioral health workforce, and to assist these individuals to prepare for entry-level or mid-level roles. If you want to see section 3 in the application, you'll find more information about the target population for each specific program option. Thanks. We'll go on to the next slide. So funding availability, match, and contract duration. This pool of money actually is a total of 3.25 million. So it's a substantial pot of money available for this grant program. There is no match required, as these dollars do not require match. And the duration of the contract is starting September now through December 2022. So it's basically about 15 months. Although there is a possibility that the end date may be extended. It currently ends December 2022, so the current grant period for now, as you are considering your programming, should be considered as the full-time grant period for spending. And all of your planning should be done based on an expectation that the grant will end December 2022. The funds for this project will be dispersed on a cost reimbursement basis, which those of you who've worked with Commonwealth Corporation previously know is a standard approach. We anticipate that lead applicants for each of the partnerships will submit one invoice each month using a template that we will provide after the contracts are set up. And per our regular process, lead applicants from each partnership are obviously going to be required to maintain and potentially submit upon request any kind of backup documentation required to show detailed backup for grant expenses. Go to the next slide. The funding set up for this particular initiative was set up in a similar method as the Healthcare Hubs funding, which was basically based on separation into 7 groups. So there are 7 eligible grantees, and those are the workforce board regions, led by a single workforce board in each of the 7 regions. So the single workforce board regions, which are the Berkshire and Cape and Islands, the maximum amount available through this grant initiative is $290,000. However, if within the application, either of those regions decides to propose a project that is focused on substance or opioid use disorder strategies, then the maximum amount of the award increases to $315,000. For the other 5 regions, the amounts are $484,000 as a max, or if within each region there's at least one project that addresses SUD or OUD workforce needs, the maximum award will increase to $524,000. Okay. Similar to some of the other Workforce Competitiveness Trust Fund projects that ComCorp has funded, the Donnelly Grant projects, we're using $7,500 per employment outcome as kind of a target amount, as what we consider a reasonable amount for cost per employment outcome. Employment outcome as differentiated from an enrollment. So an outcome proposes to serve, if an applicant proposes to serve a target population that requires more intensive services, or the training is of longer duration, thereby maybe increasing the costs, then there is an option to request the use of funding beyond or outside of or in more than the $7,500 per employment outcome. And that is something that we can work out during the design of your application period. But please make note that as you're putting together your application and you're looking at your cost per outcome, a cost per outcome, for example, is cost if you're working with a pilot project, a pipeline project, the outcome would be person gets a job, a new job. And cost per employment outcomes could include, all of the related costs like training, supports, program design, program management. So it's not just the actual training expense, it's all of the other costs that help you achieve that specific outcome. So if you have specific questions as you are putting together your application, I would encourage you to seek clarity from us about your funding as you're putting the application together. And since these dollars are not being applied for through a competitive application process, we are going to be working with you closely as you are putting together your applications, and we'll be able to provide input through your design process. You can move forward to the next slide. So target dates. Applications will be accepted now. As soon as we have released the RFP, you can start working on your applications now. And we will accept them on a rolling basis through October 27th. It is a relatively short turnaround time, but if you get your applications finished earlier than October 27th, you are welcome to submit them, and we will begin reviewing them as soon as they are submitted. There's no letter of intent required for this funding. We will, however, be answering questions as they are submitted. We will be answering them and posting them. We have a written question deadline of October 15th, just to make sure that we have the time to respond to questions in time for people to be able to look at those answers as they complete their applications. Questions should be submitted to me, kshack@concord.org. And again, all questions that are submitted here in writing and after this session will be documented and answered and posted on our website. It's our intention to review applications as quickly as possible. There is not a huge, 15 months is a relatively short period of time, so we will move as quickly as we can to review applications. If we need additional information from you after the application is reviewed, we will request it during the review period, and we will intend to come to final decisions about funding your applications as quickly as possible, and absolutely with our target to get them done by October, November, so that people can get started with their projects. Go ahead. So lead applicants and required partners. As I mentioned previously, the lead applicant for a qualifying partnership is a Mass Hire Workforce Board on behalf of their assigned region. So these are existing partnerships with existing lead workforce board leads. Our intent is that the existing lead workforce board will continue to serve in the lead capacity with this new pot of money. However, if taking on additional responsibilities of serving as the lead does present a major challenge in implementing this expansion, each region can consider selecting another one of their workforce boards as a lead. So we will accept proposals for an alternate lead workforce board as long as the entire group of WIBs within the region agrees on who that lead should be. If you have any questions or that's not clear, please post that question, and I'm happy to clarify. Okay. We can go on. I'm sorry. So required partners, obviously workforce boards and career centers within the region. Within each application, we anticipate that there will be a number of projects. I just laid out that there are 4 separate options, A, B, C, and D. You are not required to submit projects from each of the options or from all of the options. You can have a mix, it's a menu. And you can have 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, or multiples of any options. And however, there is a requirement that each project has a minimum of 1 community-based behavioral health employer as a formal partner with an MOA. So that is the minimum requirement. And obviously this has to be demonstrated by having an MOA or a letter of support that you put together and submit with your application. Okay. You can go on to the next slide. Okay, so I just said this, minimum of 1 employer partner, defined as a community-based mental health employer or SUD, OUD employer. That's a minimum requirement for every project. Other employers may be included as well. All employers who are partners must submit a signed MOA or a letter of commitment. And where applicable, this is similar to all other projects that ComCorp supports. If an occupation that you're targeting for training, is an occupation that's represented by a union at that employer, at that partner employer, then the employer, then the union must sign an MOA or a letter of commitment, which must be submitted along with your application. Okay, I'm going to the next slide. So we've already had some questions about this, and I want to, hopefully this detail will make it clear. Given the community provider focused goal of this expansion, funding is going to be prioritized for partnerships with community health centers, community mental health centers, and substance use and opioid use disorder community-based provider organizations. While only one employer is required for each project, we do encourage the pipeline training projects in particular, that's option A, to consider including multiple employers. It's not an absolute requirement, but we suggest considering it, as they are often more likely to yield a variety of job openings to give you some flexibility with your options for program grads. Okay. Although large hospital systems are not excluded from participating in this initiative, they cannot receive funding directly through this initiative. This is because the Behavioral Health Expansion Initiative is specifically designed to support capacity building among community health centers, community mental health centers, and SUD and OUD employers who may not previously have had access to existing workforce development funds. So large hospital system employers may hire graduates from option A, which are the pipeline projects, but they may not participate in option B or in option C. They may participate in option D, which is the broader capacity building activities. The intention of this project is to increase access to behavioral health supports and promote overall health equity goals by meeting the diverse needs of individuals across the Commonwealth. In particular, we're hoping these projects may help to serve those who are systematically disadvantaged within the workforce system, such as Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And that's why that is a priority of the target training group as well. ComCorp anticipates releasing additional funding opportunities starting in the fall of this year, in particular through the Workforce Competitiveness Trust funds and some other funding streams. These additional funding opportunities may likely be accessible to employers who might not be the best match for this current RFP. So hope that clarifies, and if not, you can ask further clarification questions, and I will try to put in writing. Additional partnership members, obviously applicants are encouraged to identify additional partners with experience and expertise related to their proposed target occupations or target populations that will add value to the partnership. Some examples of such partners, and this is not exhaustive, but may include local service offices of public agencies or public health agencies, employer associations, labor organizations, VOTEC schools, and other educational institutions, housing agencies, and other nonprofit training or other service providers. Any partner that you are working with through this project should sign an MOA or submit a letter of commitment. So now I'm going to hand the reins over to Tommy Heverin, who will go through some of the remaining details of the rest of the presentation, going through the rest of the details in options A through D as a start. Take it away, Tommy.
Thanks very much, Karen. I'll preface by saying that my content here is pretty in the weeds. So with that said, Let's jump into an overview. So the following slides are basically going to break down each of these 4 options in relatively similar format. So hopefully the repetitiveness creates a structure for you that is helpful. Beginning with option A. So right, option A, this is mainly a pipeline design program. And here in this program, applicants should be providing job training, placement, and support services that prepare individuals for in-demand behavioral health occupations. And we're asking the applicants to please specify a specific target occupation and then design and deliver a training program preparing individuals for that occupation. There's some examples listed here on this slide, and there are many more examples listed in the RFP. But some example occupations that you could specify on are care coordinators, residential counselors, peer roles, or a residential rehabilitation educator. And again, these are just some examples. There are many more listed in the RFP. Applicants may also propose alternative occupations than those that are listed here or in the RFP. Should you elect this approach, target occupation must still be considered a behavioral health occupation. Additionally, applicants must demonstrate that the proposed occupation is in demand, one by citing labor market information, as well as supporting employer demand, data supporting employers' demand for those roles, and also demonstrate what are the credentials required for entry into those roles. So those are the minimum criteria if you want to propose an alternative occupation, and we do encourage that should you elect to. The target population for option A will be used to train on and underemployed individuals, individuals who are looking to shift careers to another behavioral health occupation, individuals who are considered current employees at Massachusetts employers, as well as individuals from demographic groups that are underrepresented in the behavioral health care workforce. While you're designing your program, we ask you to consider the following elements and services in your design. We're going to ask you to please develop and then implement a recruitment, assessment, and selection process, including the selection criteria. We're going to ask you to provide contextualized education, skills, and work readiness trainings. We want you to engage employers that identify the job openings, to participate in the program design and/or the program delivery, and to be signing MOAs that commit to hiring either a specific number of participants or at very minimum commit to interviewing them upon completion. We want you to help assign a job developer responsible for doing active outreach and engagement with employers and identifying target occupational job placements. We're going to ask you to offer support services to participants where needed, alleviating any barriers to program participation, completion, and employment and retention, and to please provide coordinated case management as needed. If a credential is required for entry into this occupation that you choose, applicants should specify this in their proposal and explain how they will ensure that the program completers do attain the credential. As for outcome expectations for option A, we're going to ask for at least an 80% completion rate among enrolled participants and at least a 70% employment and retention rate after 30 days for those who finish the program. So that is option A. Moving into option B. Option B will seek to provide opportunities for entry-level and mid-level employees to gain new skills and or advance to a new job with their current employer that provides wage growth and career growth. We'll ask applicants to please work with regional employers to identify the demand for this program option first and foremost, and employers must propose opportunities for skill gains, for career advancement, and or wage progression that are attainable within the time frame of the program. So again, by that December 2022 deadline. Some examples of skill gains, and we kind of call these out to demonstrate that these can be kind of murky. So some examples of skill gains may include, for example, demonstrating increases in clinical competencies or other topics, which may include the following examples, but are not limited to using electronic health records and documenting them, employee supervision strategies, understanding recovery health principles, or implementing trauma-informed practices. When it comes to measuring and defining metrics for skill gains, there will be technical assistance available to you to help you figure out what are the best metrics for measuring the success around skill gains. So please do not be alarmed if that does seem murky. There will be help to support you in identifying those metrics. The target population for option B are incumbent entry and mid-level workers, who are staffed at their community-based behavioral health employers. Incumbent workers here are defined as individuals who are working at their current employer and who intend to gain additional skills that may lead to advancement to a new job with the same employer for wage growth. We're asking you to include in your program design assigned MOA from employers that commit to growing talent in-house, develop and implement a recruitment assessment and selection process and criteria, to be assigning a career coach responsible for supporting their participants throughout the duration of the program, offering additional supportive services to participants when needed to alleviate any barriers to success, providing training that prepares participants for success in the targeted occupations, working with your business partners to identify what's the best sequence of training that's going to result in a wage gain and the internal process it takes for that participant to achieve a wage gain. We're going to ask you to document any wage gains, promotions, and new employment retention at 30 days at a minimum after completing the training. And we encourage applications that seek to leverage alternative delivery methods such as online, digital, hybrid, or competency-based modules that can help meet the unique needs of incumbent workers where they are. Simply, again, if a credential is required for advancement or wage progression, that you please specify in the proposal and explain how you'll ensure that all program completers obtain the requisite credentials prior to attaining a new position at their employers. Our expectations around outcomes are that at least 85% of enrolled participants complete training, that at least 75% receive a training-related wage gain, and or 75% of participants report growth in the identified skill areas. And again, help can be provided around how to define success around those skill areas. So that concludes option B. Option C will fund supervision and mentorship of master's or bachelor's prepared staff toward a clinical licensure within a behavioral health occupation. Applicants must work with their regional employers to identify the demand for this program option. We're going to ask employers to please articulate their existing processes for supporting licensed clinicians who are offering mentorship and supervision to master's prepared or bachelor's prepared staff, and to also please demonstrate how grant funds would go towards the associated costs and time allocations for providing such supports within the time frame of the program. And again, this is a salary replacement strategy. Some example of the way that the grant funds may be used are to cover the time and support of clinical supervisors, as well as the time and support of the staff who are receiving the supervision. An example of this latter position, the supervisee could be a master's prepared therapist who requires supervision for their licensure. So it can be salary replacement for both the supervisor and the supervisee. The design requirements for option C are the following. The target population are candidates in the program who are employees at Massachusetts-based employers and who are certified or licensed to practice in Massachusetts, regardless of residence. So we do want to call that one out. We ask you to include in your design signed MOAs from employer partners that commit to grow their talent in-house, a clear recruitment and selection process and criteria. We ask you to please ensure supervisors are attaining higher levels of cultural responsiveness and other related skills to become better qualified as mentors and clinical supervisors as is appropriate. Please document all necessary reporting that's associated with clinical supervision, such as what site location, number of hours, what's the staffing ratio, and any other related metrics that can document the type of supervision that's going on. And we're going to ask applicants to please work with their employer partners to identify the clear indicators for determining progress within this program option, which may include documenting completion and or documenting progress toward completion of the licensing requirements. Expectations for outcomes may include the number of employees and supervisors who are engaged in this program, the number of staff who are attaining licensure. We ask you to please demonstrate increased access to supervision and mentorship by individuals who are underrepresented in behavioral health services, such as those who identify as Black, Indigenous, or other people of color, as well as increased access to supervision and mentorship by individuals who speak a language other than English. Like some examples could be Spanish or Haitian Creole. So that concludes option C. The fourth option, option D. The goal of this option is to provide resources to support the continued development of the existing MassHire 7-region hubs partnerships to support regional coordination that results, for example, in additional training program capacity in the behavioral health occupational fields, while also strengthening partnerships with workforce entities which may include education and training providers and community-based behavioral health employers. Grant funds may be used, for example, to support longer-term regional planning, capacity building, or other system change activities that are designed to improve placements, advancement, and retention outcomes for the region's residents within behavioral health or SUD, OUD fields. We anticipate that these activities may vary across regions and may include, but are not limited to, such activities like supporting staff capacity, understanding employer demand, understanding target population skills, understanding interests and assets, and exploring licensure requirements and policies, as well as maybe transitioning to digitally enabled or hybrid instructional delivery models to make it more accessible to access training. While you're proposing option D programming, we're going to ask that you please articulate how a strategy that incorporates regional planning and capacity building might contribute to improving multiple aspects of the behavioral health SUD OUD workforce. We'll ask you to please submit a detailed work plan that outlines how you intend to achieve your overall goals of the proposal. And we really do encourage you to leverage the existing healthcare workforce sub-partnership infrastructure that's already in place and to continue to build upon that. The ideal use of funds for this program option could be regional labor market info sharing, employer engagement and design or career pipeline strategies, long-term visioning and development of regional behavioral health workforce strategies, building a model to improve recruitment, replacement, and retention of staff, and or developing pre-training programs that may prepare individuals for entry into existing programs that would have a demonstrated past success as measured by certifications, graduations, and placement rates. Our expectations for outcomes for option D are measuring the following: any actions that have been taken to increase diversity of behavioral health SUD OUD workers by profession and or by culture and or by race or ethnicity, an increased number of training providers that are focused on behavioral health SUD OUD occupational pathways that are engaged by the mass hire system, increased levels of employee engagement in meetings and training programs, and behavioral health hubs holding meetings regularly on a regular basis or pursuing other workforce grants collectively that are engaged in the behavioral health field. So that is the overview of each of the 4 program options, and now I'll get into some more higher level components of the grant itself. So administrative requirements. So we're going to ask grantees to collect and to provide regional, programmatic, and participant level data, much like the H-Hubs grants or other WCTF grants, throughout this partnership and implementation. Upon initial award, ComCore will provide additional guidance regarding the types of data collection and specific forms that we will require for each program option, such as participant demographics, the selection and enrollment criteria, completion rates, and employment data, et cetera. Please note that ComCore is working in partnership with the Executive Office of Health and Human Services to evaluate this initiative and may use the data reporting described above to inform status updates with public and private partners. ComCore will use data from the internal database and information from the narrative reports as primary sources. Excuse me while I readmit Jeff. We'll ask you again to have participants fill out the participant registration form and confidentiality statements, particularly for options A and B. And we'll also ask for you to enter data on participants and training services in a participant level database such as Apricot by Social Solutions. ComCore is responsible for ensuring that organizations receiving grant funds have the fiscal and program systems needed to meet all relevant federal and state requirements. And so to fulfill this responsibility, ComCore will periodically request and review documentation that relates to the organization and expenses, activities associated with the grant. And we anticipate conducting at least one fiscal review during the duration of the grant period. Each grantee will be assigned a ComCore program manager, and we'll ask you to please assign a main point of contact who's accountable for the grant. Karen and I will be those on the program staff who will be supporting you with technical assistance, and we will also be working with consultants at Advocates for Human Potential, Inc., who have agreed to provide more specialized behavioral health technical assistance for the projects that are funded through this grant. And we'll have more information on them to come. We discussed some of this before, but again, the clarification period for questions is up to October 15th, 2021 at 5 p.m. We're asking for this grant that we will use an electronic submission. So in order to upload your submission, you will need to complete an online form that provides following standard information: the name of the lead applicant organization, the name of the lead applicant organization's federal employer ID number, the lead applicant organization's DUA ID number, the total funds requested, and the lead applicant organization's primary contact information to be notified upon the decision of when the grant is awarded. We are happy to host a follow-up session that overviews the online submission process, and I think we intend to do that perhaps sometime in October. So please stay tuned for that. Applicants should review all components prior to uploading your materials in order to ensure that you've completed all the required information. Should you encounter any submission issues, you can please contact Anthony Britt at abritt@comcore.org or dial up at 617-717-6909. The materials that will be included with the application we'll ask you to submit them in the following formats. So the program narrative forms will ask you to please submit in the provided Microsoft Excel file format. The budget forms to please submit in the provided Microsoft Excel file formats, and signed MOAs or letters of commitment must be scanned and then submitted in the form of a single PDF file. This will overview what the application package looks like. So part 1 is the application summary form. This form provides Comcore with summary level information about the programs that you're proposing. Part 2 is the training program application narrative, which is provided as a separate document. This form will provide a list of questions that you must address in your application, and will ask you to answer all the questions that are included on the narrative form for each program proposed as part of your application. Each individual program for options A and B is required to have their own tab. Again, this is an Excel file, so think of it as a tab as opposed to page. Options C and D should be completed on the designated tab again for each option, so they will be clearly marked. Part 3 is the budget and budget narrative forms. Part 3A and Part 3B are the budget narrative forms. These are included as separate Microsoft Excel workbooks that are labeled BH Hubs 2021 application budget forms. You must submit a detailed budget request using the provided forms. This budget form should represent the overall allocation of funds toward your behavioral health expansion grant. The budget will provide the basis for your invoice templates, so very important that it's accurate. And there are additional tabs which are provided for budget details specific to each project, and these are for either review or for backup purposes, so please keep those on file. The fourth part are your MOAs, your letters of commitment. There will be a sample MOA provided. Each partner's commitments, roles, and anticipated activities must be provided either through a jointly signed MOA among your partners or through submission of separate letters of commitments. Applications should edit and make additions to the sample MOA as appropriate, so you can adapt it for your own programs. And last but not least, part 5 is the certification component. It must be attested to online by an individual who has signatory authority for the lead applicant upon submission. And this is, again, all spelled out in the RFP in greater detail. The evaluation process for what you may expect for your applications. The way that there's about a 3-step eval process. So proposals submitted in response will be reviewed by Comcore. Representatives of EOLWD and other state agency partners may also participate in the review process. So the first step is threshold criteria screening. In this step, submissions will be screened for completeness, conformity to the program requirements, and timeliness of response. The second step is compliance screening. Here we will ensure that the applicant is in full compliance with all obligations to the Department of Unemployment Assistance, Department of Industrial Accidents, and any other obligations to the Commonwealth. Comcore will work with the Department of Unemployment Assistance to conduct this review. And the final step is the review committee. And this step of the review committee will consist of members from Comcore, EOLWD, Executive Office of Health and Human Services and Mass Health, as well as RISE Foundation. Will all be teaming up to review eligible submissions. So that's what you may expect for the evaluation process. The criteria for evaluation are above. These are spelled out in greater detail, but in addition to the scoring system here, Comcore, again, reserves the right to only consider submissions that, in our sole judgment, are complete and responsive to the solicitation requirements and include all required application components. If there's any additional need for more information, we will contact you during the review process, and we anticipate that contracts will begin as soon as possible upon review and upon approval. So this list here is kind of a combination of the different criteria associated with each option, and it is spelled out in more detail in the RFP, I believe in section 7, so you can reference that section. That concludes our content. We want to thank you for your time, and please address questions to Karen at kshack@concord.org. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat as well.
We have a few questions that people have posted already in the chat, and feel free, if you don't get time to post in the chat, obviously you can send me by email questions starting immediately. And yes, we will send a copy of, we'll either make a copy of the slide deck available on our website or send it out to, I think it's probably easiest just to put it on our website and then you can download it from there. That's all right, Rebecca Bilecki. And Jim Oliveira asked for us to describe the cost per employment outcome. And Jim, clarify, I'm not sure exactly what your question is about describing it. Can you explain a little bit more?
You'll unmute me. I did a quick, just a quick calculation, and if the cost per participant is based on those completing and employed, then we're also accounting for others that we may have enrolled and started the program but didn't finish. That I forget your rule. 20% may not enroll 20%, 100%, 20% may not make it. So that poses a question, or I guess in my mind, if you're working out of a large hub like we are, we're going to recruit about 85 to 100 people, and we've got a year to run these programs. Right? In my mind, I mean, it's a pretty short period of time to get things done, and I'm just curious about my colleagues in terms of what they, how they viewed this and reviewed it as well.
Okay, well, if there's a specific question that I can answer related to this that can make it helpful for you, I think I'm going to ask you to send it to me separately. If you want to speak with each other about it, probably this isn't like the best forum for that, but I would encourage you to.
Okay.
Be happy to. Okay. Thanks. And question from Rebecca Bilecki, does this include post-employment retention? And Rebecca Bilecki, is this, does the cost per outcome include post-employment?
That's what the question was about.
Okay. So yes, a job outcome is only counted as an outcome when the person has been employed for 30 days. So we wouldn't, anything beyond the 30 days would not be counted into it.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the questions. Wait, can educational facilities that have residential and day programs participate as employers? Heather, the community, I will say the focus is on community-based mental health. If the education facilities that have residential and day programs are community-based mental health employers, I don't know, I'm not expert enough about all of the options to know whether they fall within that category. So
thank you very much.
Okay, but if they are, absolutely. Thank you.
Karen, could I ask a question?
Yes, Ashley.
About the additional partnership members. So you list like local service offices of public agencies, housing agencies, etc. In terms of these additional partnership members, where do you all envision this playing in when, so I could see, for example, like option D, if you're expanding your regional capacity and you're convening regularly like behavioral health folks and you're tying together, housing agencies, educational agencies, kind of taking a social determinants of health perspective, I could see it fitting in there. Are there other areas where you see these, see this fitting in. And so something I have in mind, for example, is like, if there are positions amongst housing agencies that are essentially serving as, for example, community health workers as it stands, could training, it sounds like based on the behavioral health employers, housing agencies wouldn't be a partner in terms of option B. But I guess I'm just looking for clarity on what y'all are considering with the additional partnership members component.
Okay, well, I mean, I think it's a great, question, a program design question. I mean, in that case, like a housing agency or organization might be a source for recruiting participants, for example, and they might be a partner in that way. A housing agency would not probably, in my opinion, although I, could be corrected if I'm not, would not probably be considered a community mental health employer. So they wouldn't be a partner in that way, but they could certainly be a partner in providing supports to their residents who might be being trained to be employees, that kind of thing. And there may be loads of other ways that other organizations could be partners, even beyond option D.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Okay. All right, well, I want to thank you. I'm really pleased that so many people were able to attend today. We will have a recording available for you all, should you choose to want to listen to it again or share with your colleagues or partners. And we will also make the slide deck as a separate slide deck available. And again, any other questions that come up, please email to me, and we will post all questions and answers on our website as well. And just want to say as an end note, so I will be working with staff from Advocates for Human Potential starting immediately to connect with each of the each of the workforce board areas and offer our assistance as you start to think through the application and start to work with your local employers around putting together your proposals. So we're going to be available to meet with you to give input as you're starting to make some of these decisions, and we'll reach out to you to schedule time to talk about the best process for you over the next couple months. Okay, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.